is here, or Caitlin Sullivan, our staff planner, if either of those folks want to weigh in with anything on the slides, we go through the slides, that might be helpful. There's a lot of good pointers in there. And then I think I mentioned previously, it might be good to just touch base on some of the key elements of a preservation restriction towards the end of these slides.
Okay, do you want me to go ahead and present?
Yes,
Sure,
please do, Jared.
Yeah, if you could, okay, so the point of this handbook, it's 38 slides, so it's not 38 pages, it's just slides, not that bad. But the point is to give you in one document everything. It's a complex set of duties that the commission has. So I just want to, you can read the actual details later. It's late. You've been at work for a while. But first, there are several different ordinances that you have to be aware of. You don't need to memorize all of them. That's not your responsibility. You just need to be aware of them. So the first is under Chapter 2 of the City Code. There is, and we've just passed with Councilor Shan's help, clarification of all the duties of the Historical Commission. State law already sets out what those duties are, but oftentimes people don't read the state law or don't know where to find it. So we've imported it into the city code. So there it is, and you can just search it. The next item is in the city code is the demolition delay ordinance. It's under an Article 10, Roman numeral 10, called building demolition. Then state law allows something called formation of a local historic district, which is probably the most powerful regulatory scheme, but we only have one of them in Newburyport, and that's the Fruit Street Historic District. And the irony of these local historic districts is that usually once they're formed, your commission hands it off to the district commission. So you don't have a direct role at Fruit Street. Then there are two zoning ordinances, and I'll get to that. Newburyport is unusual for various reasons. And so we have a downtown overlay district that the commission plays an important role in, and a demolition control district. Next slide.
Councilor Ackerman, I don't know if you want me to speak to this or if you wanted to. I'm happy either way.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I threw in these slides or these graphics that, again, Councilor Ackerman mentioned this is all available electronically, and I did put a date on these slides, so I figured we might improve this or adapt this over time for future commissioners. But this is just meant to illustrate geographically where the jurisdictional areas are. So you have the Fruit Street Local Historic District is really a relatively small area. Right in there. Obviously, the National Register District is this area here, but doesn't have that local ordinance with the same powers. Then you have the Downtown Overlay District, so that's concentrated right in the downtown. And then the rest of the National Register District is absorbed into the Demolition Control Overlay District, and that's basically the residential area for the most part. And again, just the distinction there is that the Downtown Overlay District, the planning board is the permit granting authority for those special permits. They take an advisory opinion from the Historical Commission. In the Demolition Control Overlay District, outside of that, the larger area, it's the Zoning Board of Appeals that issues permits and, again, listens to an advisory opinion from the Historical Commission. And I know Councilor Eigenman has slides to elaborate on some of those details. And then there is the rest of Newburyport. So everything outside of that, which falls to the Historic Commission in terms of the demolition delay.
Any quick, sorry to interrupt the flow here, but just to help make this concrete. So tonight we had one of the one on Plum Island was that kind of the rest of Newburyport, good example of that. We didn't have any of the Downtown Overlay District, but we had one not too long ago with the windows at the Market Square. You might recall that. And there's also one coming up with the State Street Institution for Savings Bank. Those are both in the DOD. So we'll have examples of those. And the other two, the Merrimack Street and the Monroe and Broad Street house we talked about tonight, those were in the Demolition Control Overlay District. In one case, it was a report to the ZBA because it was over 25%. In the other case, it was a demo delay. But I'll stop there because I'm sure you'll have it's where it gets complicated. Oh, one quick question: is the Newburyport Historic District is that still a thing, or does that expired, or what?
So originally in the early 70s, they formed the first National Historic District down by the waterfront. And then the one that we're operating under now, which is still on the National Register and the State Register, the so-called Newburyport Historic District, was done in the early 80s, and it's still in effect.
Okay.
But it doesn't have regulatory power. It only rears its head when the federal government or the state government has to approve a project or give money, and then they do an historic review based on the buildings in that district. But because all that work was done almost 40 years ago, all of the buildings were inventoried, whether they were contributory to the historic district or not. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We just incorporate that work by reference.
Okay. Thank you, Jared.
So this slide is about the Fruit Street District. Councilor Agam, I don't know if you wanted to pick up here, but
Yeah, I'll go fast, and then people can answer questions. I know 38 slides is a lot. So the Fruit Street District, as I said, this is the only bona fide local historic district. There is a scheme under Massachusetts general laws for these districts. This was formed about 13 years ago. There's a commission, a standalone commission that administers it. Obviously, it's very small. The role that's retained by your commission is if a preservation restriction, which is a contract, essentially a real estate right, you would hold that.
Mm-hmm.
That's it for Fruit Street. Yeah.
Okay.
If you have questions, I can answer them.
Yeah, is that Cushing House Museum in that? Looked like it is on the corner there.
Yeah, the Cushing House is in it. So it's not actually a standalone landmark. We don't regulate any buildings in Newburyport as standalone landmarks, although we think of them that way. It's contributory to the district.
Okay.
So this is the downtown overlay district. This was the innovation that we came up with 6 years ago. And the reason why we needed to do it is they did try to form a local historic district in the early 70s when they were doing urban renewal, and it failed. And instead, the only protections we had for all of the 1807 buildings on State Street and Market Square and so on were deed restrictions because the Newburyport Redevelopment Authority condemned all of the property by eminent domain and then placed deed restrictions. They had a 40-year sunset, which expired in 2005. So in between 2005 and 2014, there were no controls on these buildings for demolition or alteration. You could do whatever you wanted with them. That was a dangerous time. We lucked out a little bit because there was a recession in there. So some of the buildings that would have been torn down, I think, were saved by economics. And the key in this district is, again, there was another effort to start a local historic district maybe 8 years ago, which again failed. And so the compromise was, okay, you don't like local historic districts, people of Newburyport, so you seem to have more trust in our planning board, and we anointed them to be the permit reviewing authority. However, they need the commission's expertise. So your commission, that's that second little bullet point, that's a key role. And a great example would be the windows on the Market Square building, the new Vera Restaurante. Again, there used to be deed restrictions. They've been gone for 15 years. So all of the restoration work that was done around 1975 was imperiled. And if it hadn't been for the commission advising the planning board and what should be done with those windows, they would not have known what to do. And then, of course, everywhere you can hold restrictions. Okay, the next bit of compromise at the same time was essentially there was no political will to have local historic districts outside of downtown. And there isn't really any political will still, 6 years later, to do design review outside of downtown, which is very odd considering how beautiful some of our neighborhoods are. So the compromise was, all right, we can all agree that if there's a building that is still standing and solid, it should not be torn down. So if they were inventoried back in that 1982 or so National Historic District that I talked about, we incorporate that by reference in the so-called Demo Control Overlay District. And the Zoning Board of Appeal cannot approve demolition of one of these buildings, that is more than 25% of its exterior walls, unless they make special findings. And again, the advisory report from your commission is absolutely vital for the zoning board to know essentially right from wrong. So the rest of the report is where what we had in 2014 before the advent of these new ideas, and that is demo delay. Demo delay is a bizarre law. It's actually not authorized under any state law. I don't know who invented it, but it's fairly clever, and you've worked with it, of course. Any building over a certain age, in Newburyport we use 75 years and 100 years for accessory. Before the demolition can proceed, it gets referred to you, and you decide whether the building needs to be studied as significant, and so on. We'll get back to that. Okay, so demolition delay. This is a city ordinance. Doesn't have any backup by state law, but you review anything that's an historically significant structure. You can read the definitions at your leisure, but the key is to understand what demolition is. It's defined very broadly. So for a building that isn't subject to all these other regulations, the sort of generic demo delay, these are all the things you have to look at, and it includes changes in roof pitch. That was an important clarification because some real harm can be done to these buildings by messing with the roof, even if you're not, pulling it, tearing it down altogether. And then the exceptions are fairly obvious: antennas, electrical equipment, things also that are not significant to the building can be taken off. Now, one thing you may not realize is that you can designate buildings as historically significant. There's that default rule of 75 years and 100 years, but these are the criteria you could use to be proactive and designate buildings for significance. Now, to demolish. So someone has a building, it's not downtown, it's not subject to the DCOD, Demolition Control Overlay District, so Plum Island. So you're out on Plum Island, building's over 75 years. They have to submit an application to you with all of these 6 items. And essentially an application is not complete unless you have all 6, because you can't do your job. So you really shouldn't feel pressured with an applicant if they haven't given you all 6 of these things. You don't have, the time period hasn't started yet. They're fairly obvious of what you need to understand the significance of the building and what the project entails.
And I would also add to that Caitlin and Jennifer and I, we usually try to identify those things, and Diane in our office when applications come in. But if anything is missed for any reason and you notice an oversight, please advise us. We certainly want to stay on top of those things and make it clear to applicants that the clock is not ticking and their applications are incomplete unless they provide all those things like Councilor Eigenman said.
Yeah, it is a team effort. That's an excellent point, because we're all human. So I mean, staff may miss something. Keep your eyes open.
Yeah, and I'd say 2 items on that list, Councilor, that I typically see missing are like the actual structural engineer report. Like, we had photographs this evening and so forth, and they were pretty convincing. I don't think there was any real doubt about the structural deficiencies that were claimed, but I didn't see an actual report from an actual engineer, although supposedly one was done. But the list of all permits, I can't recall ever having seen that. Sometimes they're mentioned in passing, but that that would be useful.
I
Yeah,
believe that.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I believe that the office considers my zoning determination, that list of permits required.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, where you check the boxes like, upward extension of a variance and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, special permit for nonconformities as well as demo delay.
Right.
That is essentially a list of the permits required for the project.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jennifer.
Okay, so here's where it gets complex, and this ordinance was written, I think, before most or all of us were around. But there's a 30-day clock once the application is complete. So when it says receipt, it's receipt of a complete application. The first task is, was the building actually historically significant? Technically, this presentation where the applicant comes in and can argue that it's not historically significant is not the public hearing. A public hearing in Massachusetts means is formal. You have to allow any member of the public to testify, whereas a public meeting is run more casually and speakers are at the discretion of the chair. The purpose of this is to give notice. That's the second bullet point, to the building commissioner. So you have to, quickly decide, all right, we got an application. It is significant. The applicant says it's not significant. We disagree. And then you get notice, and staff, of course, will help you to write the building commissioner and put him or her on notice that he can't proceed with any demolition permits. That's what the code says. Until you're done with your review. Okay, then here's the public hearing. The public hearing is the big show. So within 30 days to receive the application, and Jennifer helped me with this, that in practice what you guys do is you actually hold it together. So you can do it in one night, that's up to you. But you do have to post notice, you have to mail notice, abutters to abutters, and that's where Diane Boisvert helps out. That has to be done properly. Those are legal requirements. The key really is, again, Secretary of the Interior standards. That's the mantra that you're going to see throughout this presentation. That's what you should be referencing when you're trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong. And we already discussed what a hearing is. Okay, now what's the result? So the result is you're supposed to give a report. So a written report after the hearing and within 60 days of the demolition plan filing. So you get basically 2 months. And you tell the building commissioner, can he issue the building permit or can he not? Because there's deemed approval, which is sort of a Massachusetts thing, you snooze, you lose. You always need to file a report to protect. You just assume that. And then in the report, those are a lot of it is sort of common sense, what you would think you would put in it. But the key is it preferably preserved? That's the jargon people use. Is the building preferably preserved rather than demolished? By the way, you can interrupt me anytime and ask questions. I'm going fast because I don't want to keep you too late at night.
Yep, that's fine, Jared. Go ahead.
Okay. So if the structure is preferably preserved, then the building commissioner is barred by law. No demolition permit can issue for 12 months. The way I look at it is the builder goes into the penalty box for 12 months. And it starts when the report is filed. If the structure is not preferably preserved, you can make that determination. There's no point in putting the builder in the penalty box. And then you've done your review and you tell the building commissioner, go ahead and issue demolition permits. You can terminate it early. This, I think, is a key thing. So the applicant usually has to initiate this. They can submit an amended demolition plan. It's supposed to be during a regular commission hearing, so you should not be holding special meetings. You don't need to bend over backwards, just your normal procedure. You don't have to hold a new hearing. You already held a public hearing for public testimony. However, material changes gives you the option to hold public hearing because you may want to get input from the public, especially neighbors. Now, in order to cut the 12 months off early, you have to be satisfied of either of these two things. One, there's a bona fide, reasonable, and unsuccessful effort to find a buyer. So the concept, whoever it was that invented demolition delay in Massachusetts was, well, we'll find a buyer who loves the house and won't demolish it. Doesn't usually work that way, but that's the concept. The way that I think is more common is that the applicant doesn't want to wait 12 months. And so they accept conditions. And this is where the last bullet point is absolutely vital. Contrary to what some may think, there's no limitation in the code of what those conditions will be. The demolition delay ordinance is written in such a way that you essentially have the leverage to say, look, if you don't agree to our conditions for preserving this building, you can't do anything for 12 months. That's it. I mean, it's all you have. So your conditions can relate to any aspect of the structure. It's not just some specific aspect that was subject to the application.
Yeah, and we had, this is Glenn again, a couple, so tonight we had an example of where we kind of went through that process. We imposed a 12-month demolition delay on the Merrimack Street property. We told them, we had an initial set of, you know, I don't know what to call them, suggestions, demands, whatever you want to call them. They came back, they were like 80% of the way there. Tonight, I think we, got them a little bit closer. The only thing I would add, Jared, to what you just said is that even though, yes, we can, and I'm glad you're clarifying this, that it's not restricted to some specific thing like only that particular part of the roof they're altering or whatever. That's really important to know. The only thing I would say though is that whatever we do suggest, is got to be legally defensible in terms of if we're imposing restrictions or requiring changes, they should be consistent with those guidelines from the Department of Interior. In other words, they shouldn't be arbitrary. Is basically what it boils down
Yeah,
to.
yeah. That's a good point. I mean, sorry, I kind of skipped ahead. I mean, unlike in business and in private life, where being arbitrary for some people is a way of life, in government, you can never act arbitrarily. You cannot say, okay, we'll eliminate the 12-month delay if you walk my dog every week. You can't do that ever. So yes, go by the Secretary of Interior standard, something reasonable. Always have to be reasonable in government. Okay, so after the delay,
Jared, can I interject one thing?
Yes, please.
If you, on the previous slide where you say that they may hold a new public hearing, I think the practice is that the commission is accustomed to continuing, and customarily people want to keep the process moving. But if there is a gap, that's when you might want to re-advertise it if they came back with something that was so different.
Okay, now that reminds me, that's a good point, because I know in practice from talking to staff and to Glenn, that rather than imposing the delay, say on day 1, and then having the developer come back on day 10, to start over, that I hear you. You keep it open, and it's sort of an iterative process of, here are our suggestions. Can you come around to them, and we won't have to impose the delay. So
but only after imposing the delay is the point.
Yeah.
I think.
I'm sorry. We can lift the delay quickly if you would please listen to our conditions. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and thanks, Jennifer. That's what I tried to do correctly with this Merrimack Street one again that we did tonight, where on the first hearing and public hearing, we went ahead and imposed the delay with the understanding with the applicant and their attorneys and so forth that, let's continue talking, continue working. I think we can work this out, but so yes, the clock has started, but we can probably resolve this more quickly than 12 months. And it seemed to work out okay.
Yep.
Okay, so unfortunately for many years in Newburyport, there was an ambiguity. It didn't say what happened if they didn't actually use the demolition approval after the 12 months, but we fixed that finally. So there's a window. They have to act within 6 months. And it has to be on the permit that was described in their application. You can't it's not like a game where they get through demolition delay and then they can apply for something else later. It's got to match. If they don't do it within those 6 months, they have to start over. Now, there are penalties. There has to be some hammer for illegal demolition, which unfortunately has happened in the report. And you can see what the consequences are.
So all adjoining parcels under common control, does that mean, and it sounds like that might be the case of a developer that has some adjoining parcels?
Yes, I
Something
mean,
like
an example would be the wine property, where there are several buildings or a development. In Massachusetts, this often comes up with, checkerboarding of lots and, having one lot owned by your wife and one by your cousin, and that doesn't fly. It all is looked at together.
I'm just curious, can you think of, off the top of your head, can you think of a case where this blackout has been applied locally recently?
No,
Oh, okay.
I can't.
Okay.
All right, so that's demolition delay, and it sounds like most of you are familiar with that already. Okay, now downtown, which is we're still learning 6 years in. And again, this is an overlay district. It's a form of zoning. Okay, so the intent, this is important because it's what allowed the ordinance after bitter fights over local historic districts to pass unanimously. So protect the land use pattern, city's architectural, cultural, economic, political, and social heritage through rehab, preservation, and enhancement of the historic downtown. So what I'm saying is there was unanimity on the city council, the legislature for Newburyport that downtown is special. This is a special area. It deserves the highest protection. So how do we deal with it? Well, special permit. Special permit, there's some ambiguity in Massachusetts, but, and Andy may not agree entirely, but in my experience, it's kind of the Swiss Army knife of zoning in Massachusetts. Things are rarely allowed by right. You don't want to have to make people get variances. Special permit is basically the preponderance of evidence is such that the planning board says it's okay. Now, they have to get a special permit downtown for altering any character defining feature of the structure listed in that 1982 Newburyport Historic District. And they're relying on you, the commission, to provide an advisory report. And after they have your report, they cannot authorize the special permit for an alteration unless they make a finding that the Secretary of Interior standards and the specific standards written in the ordinance have been met. And so a good example is the recent restaurant that went into the old West Row. It was not going to meet the Secretary of Interior standards, and the commission told the board that, and they got the message. Now, there is some work that is excluded from downtown review, DOD review by the planning board, and that's Jennifer's call. She's specifically the person who decides that, and there is demolition delay that applies. Again, that was an important political compromise, and Jennifer will help you with that.
Can someone give an example of what might fall into that exemption?
Yes. So if you go down on these exclusions, do you see alteration of a one or a two family building within an underlying residential district?
Uh-huh.
There's still demolition delay that applies, but they don't need a special permit.
Oh, I see. Yep, got it.
Okay. And again, to make it streamlined, Jennifer, as the zoning administrator, she decides whether the exclusion applies so that there's no argument. And if someone disagrees with her call, then they go to the Zoning Board of Appeal.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a lot here. You don't need to read it all, but essentially we're trying to, with the exception of the 1 and 2 family buildings, which is quite frankly a political compromise made, the rest of it's fairly intuitive. If it's a temporary structure like a tent or something, they don't need a special permit. If they're altering, they're just doing maintenance and replacing in kind, they don't need a special permit. If they're altering something which isn't even historic, that was added later and doesn't contribute to the building, they don't have to do that. Another, I wouldn't say political, but logistical, is we exempted windows, doors, signs, and awnings. We didn't, at the city council, want to compel applicants, say on State Street, every time they changed a window, to go to go and get a special permit. Let's see, landscaping, and then there's a disaster exception. Okay, what's a character defining feature? Well, there's a lot of legalese here, but the idea is that it's exterior, not interior, exterior. And it's anything that's understood to contribute to significance of the structure when it was listed in 1982. So, because again, we didn't want to have a new argument every time. So we have copies, or I believe, of almost all of the data sheets, photos, and survey forms from 40 years ago. And, you know, those are all relevant. Anything in connection with that district from those days has to be considered. And it doesn't matter when it's dated, because not all of the material was done in the same year. Some of it was cobbled together over time. The second bullet point is important. I mean, for example, there was one planning board member who did not understand that an exterior architectural feature is not necessarily a thing. It can also be a style or a general arrangement or setting. This is understood in historic preservation nationwide and worldwide. It's not just, for example, that a particular storefront is from 100-year-old wood. It's that the pattern and the type and the style is historic rather than modern, and that is protected as an exterior architectural feature. Okay, so what happens here? So there's more deadlines. 30 days prior to submitting the application to the planning board, the owner, and it could be the developer on behalf of the owner, they have to give you, your commission, documentation so you can do your report. It's deliberately done prior so that you can do your work and you don't get jammed. Again, documentation, not unlike what you would get for demolition delay. Current photographs, historic photographs, plans, elevations, drawings, photographs of adjacent structures or setting. Again, staff will help you, of course, get this material. But if there's something you feel you're missing, you know, because you don't have the right information, ask. You know, it's really incumbent on the applicant to provide proper information. Okay, so 30 days after you get a complete application, your report is due. It's pretty short, but that's what's needed. So for demolitions, you explain in the report the significance of a structure and its importance within its setting. So not just the building as important by itself, but how it relates to its neighbors, because essentially downtown is an ensemble of buildings. That's why it's so attractive. For all other work, you know, there are specific criteria in the DoD that staff can point you to. You know, we refine that over time. Here are the, you know, standards for storefronts or windows or doors or chimneys or whatever. It's all in there. And again, don't be shy. If you recommend to the planning board, listen, you know, we can't give you all of the expertise that you need to evaluate this application. We specifically wrote into the ordinance that the planning board can request that the owner help them hire somebody who knows. So that's the whole point. Now let's get the information. Let's get it.
Yeah, I would just add, Jared, that that setting is something that is very much on our minds with respect to 93 State Street. You know, where they're expanding the back at the Institute for Saving, and how that affects the setting in its particular environment.
Yep, no, those are relevant considerations. Okay, and again, the planning board, they can't just take your report and throw it away. I mean, they're supposed to take your historical report and also a professional's conditions report of the building, and they have to consider them. They can't just shoot from the hip. That was the deal. They also must adhere. We tighten this language. It's not optional. They have to adhere to the Secretary of Interior standards. All the language is there for you to read, but that's the gist of it. And it's not just the standards. There are guidelines that the Secretary of Interior has issued over the years, really getting into the esoterica of how to deal with buildings. They're all incorporated by reference into this ordinance. They're all relevant. Okay. Now the DCOD is truly the most unusual ordinance of all. And again, it's everything in the National Historic District, so the old part of the city, but not downtown. All right, so the intent, as I said, was there was political consensus across the spectrum that no one could really in good conscience justify razing, obliterating, putting into a landfill an historic building unless basically the building can't be saved. Those are the special permit conditions that the zoning board is to make. It's not intended to regulate mere alteration, even demolition of character defining features, because that was the deal. The deal was, all right, we're not satisfied with mere demolition delay, because all it does is give a 12-month reprieve to buildings that ultimately will be put into a landfill. So the focus of the DCOD is keep buildings from being destroyed, but it's not design review. That's the bargain. And then there's a list that staff has for you of all the buildings that are subject. Okay, so then we had to decide, all right, what does it mean to put a building in the landfill? We needed some practical rule. And the practical rule, for really lack of anything else, was if you demolish more than a quarter of the walls, most buildings are rectangular, not all of them, but if you demolish more than a quarter, that, of a contributor to the national district, you need a special permit to justify that. The concept being, most times, it would be the rear wall that's demolished. And the rear wall is okay to demolish. It's the least public, and we wanted to allow adaptive reuse of buildings. And it would still be recognizable if that rear wall were demolished, but not if the front were demolished. It's true. Okay, so again, the deciding body is the Zoning Board of Appeal this time, because they dominate in the neighborhoods versus downtown. But again, they need your historical report. And look at the finding that the zoning board has to make. It's very strict. Unless the structure retains, quote, no substantial remaining market value or reasonable use. And they have to take into account, yes, the cost of rehab, but it's the codes for historic structures, not new structures. And there are many, many exceptions for historic buildings that the building commissioner can grant nationwide, not just in Massachusetts. So again, only supposed to get a special permit to demolish one of these buildings if basically it's a total loss and cannot be saved. Okay. If it's less than 25% of the external walls, well, then it's not subject to DCOD, but there is demo delay that, that still can apply. And Jennifer really helped us tighten this up last year, because the roof line and the screwing around with dormers was slipping through, and we closed off that loophole. Maybe Jennifer can explain.
Well, so there are still dormers that are exempt, but the slide illustrates some that are, or the top two is an example of something that would be an acceptable dormer. You can see it's set back from the end wall. It's set up from the lower eave line, so that it really is secondary to the primary roof line. The lower one is an example of, at least on the vertical face, of a dormer under the previous code. And we all look at that and see a third floor, I think. That's what we're trying to avoid. It happens to be set back far enough on the front face that it might be exempt, but I do think the new guideline helps to allow certain pieces to move forward, allow people to put, for instance, a stair up into their attic, things like that, without creating a whole third floor.
And the language on this, if you could zoom out again and show the whole slide. The language on this was negotiated with several builders that cooperated, guys that have been around for decades, so we could reality check this of what was reasonable. You know, Jennifer put her finger on it. What we don't want is people to call something a dormer that's really a new floor. Okay, so so non-contributors. If it's not a contributor, because there could be buildings that didn't get listed in 1982 that are in a neighborhood, there's still demolition delay. And again, you have the power to designate something as historically significant. So we've never used that power that I know of, but you can.
So Jared, how would that be triggered? Like, Jennifer, would that be, would you kind of, when that comes in, if it's not listed as contributing on, you know, the list, someone would have to decide to have the historical commission look at it, right?
I would call it out if they were making a roofline change on a structure in the DCOD that's not listed as contributing, but they are making that roofline change. I would trigger it for a demo delay review process.
Okay.
You could look at the structure then and say, it's old, but it's not contributing, and then you would just release it.
Okay.
Or you would not invoke demo delay.
Okay, so it would just be part of the demo delay process. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, so then there are these strict rules before something gets put in the landfill. Again, you're supposed to get time ahead. Your task is a little less here than it would be downtown, so it's 21 days instead of 30 that the owner has to give you the application. And again, all of the information that you would need. Shorter timelines. So within 20 days after the complete application is received, you're supposed to give your report. Again, relative importance, not just to the structure intrinsically, but in the context. In this ordinance, it refers to the city block, but it's the same concept, the ensemble, the context. Again, the ZBA, they're sheepish about it, or used to be, but you know, they can really insist on a professional being engaged. And you know, it's not, despite what some builders may say, it's not that hard to find professionals to do this work. And again, just as in downtown, the planning board must consider these reports. They have to consider your historical report and whatever conditions report comes in. Did we go back? We go back. What happened?
Hey, I wonder if I could have a quick question, Jared,
Yeah.
because it came up tonight that we were reviewing that one on Monroe Street, and the attorney was saying that, well, the only thing we should be concerned about is whether what they're planning to demolish is going to remove something historic and so forth. But reading this, it seems that you know, relative importance of historic structure in context of city block, you know, that could be interpreted as including the comments I was saying about, well, you know, we might want to have something in our historic report that says, you know, we think that the overall size of what you're planning to do kind of has a bit of a negative impact on the neighborhood or something like that. So is this a kind of a case of interpretation or what?
Well, it's a tough one. I can say I don't think we contemplated that. Again, it's the importance of the structure. So if what they're doing is they're demolishing a structure which now currently fits within its context, it's in scale with its neighbors, and and they're replacing it with something that sticks out like a sore thumb, that is absolutely relevant to your report.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one's kind of boring. Okay, so, go ahead. It's getting late, so I don't want to interrupt with too many questions.
Okay. All right, and then finally, you know, there's sort of miscellaneous tasks that we turn to, and that is we need advice on these preservation restrictions, and I'll explain what those are in one slide. So it's really an easement, just like you can have an easement to park your car on someone else's land, the city can take, the historical commission on behalf of the city can take an easement on a building. So, and I give the history, we used to have these downtown. Again, we didn't extend them for some reason. What's done is done. It's a bit complex. The Mass Historical Commission has to review them too because of state law. But you are our experts at the city for, you know, what the preservation restrictions should say. The city council reviews them as well before the mayor may sign them. But, you know, you're the experts. Oh, and how are these things enforced? It's really by injunction. In Massachusetts, ultimately, if things totally change, you won't be able to enforce them anymore. But so long as the neighborhood is the same, you can go into court and get a court order to stop them. And then I think this is it. So the Mass Historical Commission, which is, you know, that has a lot of expertise, but is understaffed. And it's funny, it's the only agency I've ever dealt with in my career where they say, don't call us and don't come to our office. Kind of interesting. So they're hard to get in touch with. Anyway, they're going to refer to you as the local experts. So sometimes the Mass Historic is doing a review. So say there's federal funding or permitting or state funding or permitting to do something. A good example would be the Titcomb Street Garage that Andy managed. And that involved state and federal funding. So they needed some advice from the Newburyport Historical Commission. They consult with you. And again, everyone's using the same language, which is Secretary of Interior standards. All right, I think I've gone on long enough. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Councilor Eigenman. This is Andy. And I'll defer to the chair whether you wanted to. We had talked previously whether it would make sense to go through the salient elements of a preservation restriction. I don't care, frankly, myself, whether that's tonight or another night, but we could cover that another meeting if you prefer. It's up to you.
Yeah, I think it might be best because it's getting pretty late. And there were one or two quick questions. There's the most pressing question that I'd love to just cover tonight, Andy and Jared, is about recusal. Patrick, this was kind of your question. Shall I ask it for you, or would you like to speak to it? And that's with the Institution for Saving situation and your involvement in that neighborhood. So you're muted at the moment, but did you want?
It's Peter. That's why he's not answering.
I'm sorry, Peter McNamee. It's, see how late it is.
I'm sorry, I was having trouble with my speakers shutting off, so I missed the last part of it.
Okay, basically, yeah, we've gone through the presentation. Peter, did you want to ask your question about recusal in the case of the Institution for Savings and what that involves, or shall I ask it? Go ahead and ask it.
You or I doesn't matter to me, Glenn. So I'll defer to you if you want.
Well, okay. In general, Jared or Andy, I'd love some clarification on recusals. Peter, in this specific case, to make this concrete, you know, Peter's in the neighborhood. He's not a direct abutter, but he is in the very close vicinity to the Institution for Savings project there, and has had some involvement. I think his concern is that he doesn't want to have the appearance of a conflict there, and he also doesn't want to do anything that might tarnish the report or decisions made by the commission, and for the applicant to cry foul, oh, you've got a commissioner in there who's, you know, dead set against us, or whether that's true or not, you know, but anything like that. So can you clarify what the rules are exactly as far as when we need to recuse ourselves? And does that mean we just can't vote, or do we have to leave the room entirely, or what?
I can answer that, 'cause we deal with that all the time in the city council. Essentially, to boil it down, there's a whole handbook that you can read, but if there's an economic interest by the commissioner or a close relative, that commissioner should recuse him or herself every time. And I'll get to the specific case. And the recusal means no participation.
Okay.
Sometimes on the planning board, people are a little loose about it, but at the council, the best practice is literally to leave the chamber during that item so that there's no appearance of impropriety. That's what the Attorney General advises.
Mhm.
Now, when is there an economic interest? Obviously, it's property values is usually the argument. And so if you're a direct abutter, that's easy. I would also say an abutter within 300 feet. So it's like the notice rule. But
Mhm.
also, I think Peter's asking the right question, which is how will it reflect on the body? So if you feel that it could be perceived that you have an economic interest, and I do mean economic interest, you probably should recuse. One thing I want to clarify is you do not have to recuse yourself because you have an opinion. That doesn't quite, like, I remember Andy and I were kind of doing battle at one point with the Port Plaza, and the owner was saying Andy's biased against strip malls, and the answer is yes, he is. He's a city planner, so everyone on the historical commission is biased in favor, I would hope, of historic buildings. So that's not a problem. Okay, it's economic interest.
I see.
Yeah, I agree with everything Councilor Eigenman has said. I think whenever board members have asked this sort of question over the years, I generally recommend the same thing I think Councilor Eigenman got at, which is if you can avoid at all even the appearance of a conflict of interest, even if the connection is somewhat remote, to the development party involved, or the property owner, or the radius that you are from the other property. I think it's always best to recuse yourself, if not because it meets the letter of the law, because it's better to avoid even the suggestion or the argument that there was any impropriety going on. So it's better for all of your all board roles and anything that comes out of any of the documentation that comes out of that. It's always good if you can recuse yourself from any such matter. And as always, I'd recommend just consulting me or someone else on the staff here if you have questions about that. These questions come up periodically, and they're usually pretty easy to clarify in a given instance whether or not it makes sense to recuse oneself.
Okay, thanks, Andy. So Peter, does that help you out?
It helps me out. I'm still not entirely clear on the degree to which I recuse myself. Clearly, I wouldn't vote. I think I hear now that I wouldn't even deliberate whether or not I can be present and speak as a property owner, which I guess would constitute economic interest. So I guess that answers that question, but it would be necessary to leave the chamber. Is that what I'm hearing as well?
Yeah, that's what the Attorney General advises. I realize it's difficult because just because you become a commissioner or a city councilor, you don't give up your own right to speak. So it's difficult, but that's the advice. Councilor Vogel often has had this come up because he has businesses downtown, and he does sometimes attend. But it even matters how big the room is. I mean, for example, if you're going to be doing a Zoom call, you certainly should be able to listen to the Zoom call. There's no impropriety there. It really has to do with the appearance if you're in a small room together and your colleagues are looking at you.
How about the letters that I've had published in the paper?
Again, you don't forfeit your right, and those letters were not, as I understand it, you weren't lobbying your colleagues. That would be a no-no. You can't use your relationship with Glenn and Patricia
Right.
and the other commissioners, but you're not stifled from free speech. You don't have to silence yourself.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
By the way,
very
I know
much.
why I called you Patrick, because that's the guy in the Avengers, right? Glenn, did you watch the?
I don't know.
Patrick McEwen.
I think I'm just getting punchy.
Okay.
So we have a couple minor items on our agenda still. Let me first of all thank you, Jared Eigenman, so much for the work you put in this. I know it means a lot to you, and you've been really, I think you've been a great asset to the city in terms of historic preservation and getting these ordinances cleared up. So I really appreciate the work.
I'm glad to do it, and you have good staff to advise you.
Yep.
Lean on them.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you, Councilor Agaman.
Yes.
Okay, well, that was, I hope for particularly Joe and Peter, I hope that was helpful. I think it was helpful even to me, and I think for our other members who've been around a while, I hope it was also helpful to you as well. You have the, that what he's calling a handbook, that presentation, we have that now, and as Andy says, they'll keep that up to date and so on. So, we skipped over approval of minutes, but let's not forget to do that. That's from 5/28. That was our last meeting. And I know Patricia pointed out there was a couple of clarifications we made to those, which, Gretchen has done. So, for the sake of time, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes as amended most recently by Gretchen, the minutes from 5/28. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Patricia. I see a hand up from Christopher. Did you have a question, comment, objection?
Why don't we go ahead and vote on the minutes, and then I can ask that question.
Okay. Well, as long as you've got your mic on, Christopher, are you in favor of approving the minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Peter?
Yes.
Okay. Ron?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And myself is a yes, and I assume,
Yes.
Patricia, you're okay. So the minutes are unanimously approved as amended. Go ahead, Chris, did you want to make a comment or ask a question?
I just want to know if we're going to continue as a group to have this discussion. That was helpful. We're going to continue in future meetings to discuss. I guess the reason I bring it up is for the second time in as many weeks maybe, or we've been sort of told by an attorney representing a client what we can and cannot do. And I'm not sure I'm totally clear on some of maybe the finer points. So
yeah,
if we're not planning on it, I would suggest maybe we try to do that. Or...
Yep. Well, you may or may not have noticed, and I see your hand up, Patricia, too, so we'll get to you in a second, that I handled this a little bit differently than the time a few meetings ago. I'm personally feeling a lot more comfortable with my knowledge of the ordinances. The short answer to the question is yes. I think this is an ongoing discussion because the ordinances can be complex and there are those gray areas of interpretation. So the short answer, Chris, is yes. I think we'll continue to have questions and we'll continue to engage with folks like Andy and staff and counselors like Eigerman to clarify things. If you notice tonight, when Ms. Mead attempted to, or not attempted, asserted what our role was, I simply said, your comments are noted. However, I feel confident that we're within our rights to put X, Y, Z in the report. So and that's kind of how I left it. So
I think it was well handled. So I don't want to prolong this discussion any more than anybody else does. But the comment is there's no city ordinance that says this, and my thought was there's probably no city ordinances that cover a ton of things, right?
Yeah. Right.
Therefore, because it doesn't say that you can't do it, you can do it, and that's not. I don't really see that as our role to kind of rubber stamp things that aren't already on the city ordinance. If it's on the city ordinance that prohibits it, then they don't need us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Could I chime in quickly?
Sure.
First of all, I really appreciate all the work that went into the slides. I think everyone should hang these in poster form all over their home. And we have really good attorneys in Newburyport. If I need something done, I will call one of them because I know they work really hard representing my interests. But they represent the interests of applicants. They present arguments and interpretations suited to their goals. That's what they're supposed to do. But we are serving the city, and it's inherent in all of these boards that there's going to be conflict because everyone who comes to the Newburyport Historical Commission wants to alter or demolish all or part of an historic building, and we're all here because we don't want that to happen, and we don't want development that's not sensitive and protective of our houses and neighborhoods. And it's a thankless task, and you will get criticized and your authority will be challenged, but as long as we know the ordinances and apply the standards and sort of, you know, stand our ground, this city will be so much better off for our efforts. And I just really appreciate everyone who's on this commission. I know the meeting was really long tonight. Zoom sucks. I am Zoom exhausted. You know, it's a lot of work to do, but, you know, it's our job to know the rules and to apply them and to interpret them. And we've never been arbitrary or vague. I think that we have not exercised our authority sufficiently. And I hope that this is sort of a new beginning now that everything is written down and very clear. So thank you everyone for hanging in there tonight.
Yeah, and I would, the only thing I would add to that is something I said earlier about during Mr. Eigerman's presentation, that when we do assert our role, which is perfectly proper and appropriate, we just need to be not arbitrary, as you know, we discussed a little bit earlier, and you know, we need to be able to defend our position. And I think, you know, as long as we can do that, which I think, I know I'm personally try to be careful to do so, then I think we'll be perfectly fine. Okay,
Glenn,
yes?
sorry, this is Andy. If I could
Yep.
just jump in there real quick. I think that the presentation that Councilor Eigenman, he put together most of the text in those slides, and Jennifer and I provided some additional information to supplement and kind of flesh it out. And again, I'll defer to you whether you want to take up any kind of detailed discussion on PRs, but I would suggest if commissioners have any thoughts on areas where you're looking for greater clarification, or you have a question about something that maybe we didn't answer sufficiently, that is the reason why we might perhaps update the booklet and the presentation slides so that all commission members now and in the future can continue to go back to that as a resource. And I think the reason why Councilor Eigenman wanted to spend some time on this with us was to make sure that you as commission members do have that level of confidence in, as Glenn said, in your own ordinances, so that you're not essentially duped by, you know, an attorney or developer who wants to assert, you know, what they want to have happen, you know, as Patricia pointed out, their interpretation or one that's beneficial to their application, but rather your full understanding of the scope of your jurisdiction. Clearly there are limitations to all boards' jurisdiction at some point, but to make sure that you fully understand your jurisdiction, your role. And again, we're here to help out with any new little pieces that aren't filled in there, but if you want to ask us questions or have us follow up on something, and we can circle back to get you clarification.
Yeah, and I think we will need to pick up on the preservation restrictions, Andy, particularly if we do need to re-review the Central Church one. But you know, they come up often enough that I think it would be helpful to go over those, just so we're familiar with the overall layout of those. I don't think that would take an inordinate amount of time.
No, it would be relatively brief. I would ask, I guess, if you don't mind, maybe we'll just, Caitlin and I will ask Diane to carry it on the next couple of agendas. If you can't handle it at your next meeting because you've got the institution or anything else that you're taking time with, then we can carry it to the next meeting and take it up then.
Okay.
Go to you.
Yeah. If you guys want to start sort of outlining that'd be great, because we do want to follow up on that.
Okay, yeah, we'll just carry it on the next agenda or two until we, assuming you have time for it at one of the end meetings. And
Okay.
I'll flip through a preservation restriction and just kind of summarize some of the key points and sections that I think you'd want to pay attention to as commission members and understand how they are important to the preservation restriction and the features you're trying to protect and the legal issues involved. So.
Okay. One last peripheral comment. I kept my video on for most of this meeting because I did find during the planning board meeting, it was somehow made it feel more real in a way to see the chair, Bonnie Sontag, to actually see her there talking and so on. So I left my camera on for most of the time. Did people find that distracting or just helpful, or neither? Any thoughts on that? And
I like it. I wish you'd wear funny hats, but it's a helpful focal point.
Maybe the arrow through the head.
Yeah, it works for me.
Yeah, I would agree. I like it.
Okay. Well, think about whether you want to, you have the capability of doing your video. So I'll leave it up to you. And Peter, I'd love to know how you got that static picture. I'll have to look through my various settings. Maybe I have a static picture I want to put up if I don't feel like doing video. But anyway,
don't use the same picture.
What's that?
Just don't use my picture.
No, I won't use yours. All right. So I think most people are ready to hear a motion to adjourn, unless someone else has something else.
No, Glenn, I'm sorry. This is Andy again. I just wanted to note that Malcolm was apparently attempting to join the meeting earlier, but he had ended up in the attendees list. I tried to promote him to a panelist, as we had tried and done successfully before, but for some reason he was not going through. And then I tried to unmute him, and that didn't seem to work either. And then he kind of disappeared. So he may have been having some sort of technical issue, and we can follow up with him. But just wanted to let you know that it looked like he was trying to attempt to connect at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
Andy, the last 3 meetings, I had a similar problem. You might remember, for the first 15, 20 minutes, I was in the attendees list and not a panelist. And last time I learned that it's because in the Zoom invitation that goes out, the standard that we all got, because I've got Zoom loaded onto my machine, the actual client, I take the meeting ID and I enter it in join meeting and the password and whatnot, and that puts you in the attendees room. If you click on the link, I found that puts you as a panelist. For some reason, there's that difference. So maybe Malcolm is making the same mistake I was making.
Yeah, and that may be part of it, I guess. And you're right. The link that was provided in those automatic emails, which I did actually send to him, by the way, when I noticed he was having some trouble, I resent the invitation email to him. The link is important, like I've said before, because it makes you immediately a panelist when the meeting is going on and starts up, and that's better. Obviously, when we go live, I can try to find you in the attendees list and promote you to a panelist, but it's not clear to me why I was not able to successfully move him to a panelist position. He may have been having some technical issue on his end that I couldn't quite be aware of. I couldn't communicate with him.
Well, thanks for letting me know. I hope, I know Caitlin is still on. Caitlin, can you try following up with Malcolm? I know he usually answers his cell phone okay. Maybe you guys can try to figure out what,
Yeah, I'll try and find out what he was experiencing during the meeting. I will. Yep.
That'd be great. Thanks,
Okay.
Caitlin. Okay, does anyone care to make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, someone has said something like Joe. Okay, and I'll assume, Patricia, you're in favor?
Yes.
I am in favor. Peter?
Yes.
Christopher?
Yes.
Okay, Ron?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
I think that's all of us. Well, 10:25 p.m. It was a long one. Thanks everyone for sticking with us. Good meeting. I'm pretty pleased with our progress. Of course, we have some, well, I have some work to do. Got to put together quickly that report on 342 Merrimack and so on, but pretty happy, I'm pretty happy with the overall result. I think we made a lot of progress towards getting the preservation that was appropriate to that particular structure. And I think that'll work out okay. At least I hope it will. So thanks very much to everybody. I'll bid you good night and stay well.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.